there's a conversation about what are we doing and why. And if anybody's going to watch this, um, and you're going to talk to people about my coming to Boise, maybe we can talk a bit about why we're doing this and what exactly it is that we're doing.
Okay.
You open to that?
I'm open
Okay.
to
So, so what are we doing? No, um, I'll start. Um, you came to me because you had, I don't remember how you managed to land on my shores, but you did some other breath work and you came to effigy and you really liked it. And you
that.
also trained in this other method, but you did say that effigy was, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was powerful. It was more powerful. And
Very much so.
yeah. So, I mean, I didn't want to put words in your mouth, but I think this is the most important thing. Like, if all of us are following what's attractive to us, like and my experience of you so far as a person is that, like, you're chasing your your spirit, you're chasing the things that you want for yourself, and you're um unusual probably even to people who are seekers, because there's a depth of and a commitment that a lot of people don't have to, like, going deep into different kinds of practices and things. And
Mhm.
so for you to have trained in a whole other breathwork method and then come to mine and say it's more powerful and then come back, and I feel like that's an important part of how it is that I'm coming to Boise, is that there's something here that's of value. Um, and then there was, we had conversations about whether or not you would be a facilitator of effigy breath work, but I'm in a moment. I hadn't left my house in almost 5 years, and I can't say that for too much longer because I've already been Toronto, Louisville, and Boston only in the last 3 weeks. But I got the dog an air fryer during the pandemic, and I stayed home. I didn't go anywhere, and now I realize, like, being out in person is um, so much at the heart of the work that I do. And I had said that I want to be back in public, so we're sharing my desire to meet new people and share this work and give other people the opportunity. I've been to Boise and I've done breath work in
Mhm.
Boise too. So, and I really liked it there. Um, I had, yeah. So that, and for you to be able to have a deeper experience of the work with me, like us being in person, I think it will logarithmically be more powerful for you. But also, I think there's what I hope is a blessing, is that in us sharing our passions for the work with other people, that's going to change both of our lives in some way. And in your life, it's that um, it'll change the way that you are in relationship to people as a healer and in relationship to your own work. And I think, yeah. So that's why I think we're doing this.
Mhm.
Does
Yeah,
that
that totally
why are
lands.
you smiling? You're
Because that
smiling.
totally lands. I think, well, I mean, you and I have talked a few times, and I'm pretty cerebral. Things have to be like, you know, thought out, right?
Yeah.
The typical Virgo, like, where is this gonna go? What are we doing here? And it feels like both of us are kind of in this space of like, we don't know where we're going. We don't, we know, I know that
But
I'm
I'm
drawn.
not a Virgo, so I'm I think you're more yeah. I never
Yeah,
know where I'm going.
Sure. Yeah, and it's my nature to always have know where I'm going, and, when you and I started talking, I think there's been just I don't know where this is going, and my personality doesn't need to know that, which is super exciting, and it's also, like, it's a little scary because I'm usually somewhat feeling like I have control and all those things, or I know what's expected or what's gonna happen, and I have no idea, which is really cool. And to be in person, I think, with you and a group breathing, I think will be transformative on so many levels.
I think also because you've done plant medicine and stuff, so I think you know the group journey in a certain
Yeah.
way, but
Yeah.
not in this way through the breath work.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that, and to anybody who's listening, like, well, I think I want to capture two parts of the work because it's the two parts of our life. There's the inner life and the outer life. There's the vertical plane, which is our connection to spirit. And I was just on a podcast with this guy on a boat. Um, he's not even on land, so he was asking about what does it mean to be grounded, and he was an hour and a half late because when he gets out on the water, he forgets time. But um, you know, I think manifesting, like, there's this part of being able to imagine something that doesn't exist and make it happen. And I think that whether you're a Virgo or not, I think you're open to that too. But
Mhm.
that second part of it is like you're talking about the linear part of you needs to know that there's a way for to manifest this. And I think that what I keep sharing with you in our many conversations that we had is kind of I'm existing in both worlds. One is I don't know what wants to happen and I never do, and I'm trying to be available to my highest potential more than I want to just manifest. I'm okay, I want to manifest going to Boise, but if I don't get to go to Boise, at least I want the process to work. And I felt like that whole way through been doing that. But I do have a part of me, it's not Virgo. I have many planets in Capricorn. So there is a structure. We made an agreement. When are we going to book the ticket? Where are we going to go? What are we going to charge? What are we going to do? So I'm
Mhm.
with you on both parts of it. But to me, like, breath work at its core, the breathwork, the way that I'm doing it, is not about training anything. It's about coming in contact with something. But I think that it's only one part of the journey because you do have to try to manifest who you are at the same time. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the linear part of you. But what I heard and what you're saying is being vulnerable to the things you want that don't yet exist with a complete stranger you've never met in person, and
Mhm.
then you're going to
Mhm.
share all this with your community and people you know and maybe don't know very well. Like, this is a huge risk for you to do that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. Mhm. Yeah. It's not my personality in any way.
Yeah, is it not? I mean, is your personality and your soul that much different, you think?
Well, the conditioned part of my personality, the conditioned part
Yeah.
to kind of not be seen, not be in front of, put my name out there or anything like that.
Yeah.
That's definitely the conditioned personality of me for sure. This is a step. This is definitely I think there've been
Mm.
uncomfortable moments over the last couple weeks as we were, planning all this because it's like, yeah, this is out of my comfort zone, which is great. It's always good to get out of your comfort zone.
It's great to one part of you and not to another. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, the fact that you move forward anyway says something about where you are in your path, and that is that living under the conditions, also we're close in age. We won't tell each other what our ages are, but I'll just say that I'm all gray. But you know this is not a good time to live in conditions. There's not
Right.
even that much time left. So um I think that if your person I think if I don't think you're talking about your personality. Just so there was something else I was going to say, but I'll just say I don't think you're talking about your personality. You're talking about your conditioning, because I think personality. What I what I was going to say is that I think our personality is built for the life we're meant to live, but to live inside of conditioning,
Mhm.
which is its own form of trauma,
Right.
is a miserable life. And
Mhm.
what I said in my book, you held it up. I just did a podcast,
Mhm.
so here's my book, The Trauma Code. So uh, the idea of the trauma code, and I'm just going to use myself as an example, but the idea is that the very thing that is your wound, is the difficult thing that you've lived in, is actually the compost for growing your life purpose.
Yeah.
So the problem is, and when you don't unlock it, the problem, you just live in the adverse effects of trauma. And in your case, it would be there's a certain kind of conditioning and a way to do things, and you be linear and you be subservient in some way, and then that's the adverse effects of it. But the trauma code says that that actually is part of what unlocks your life purpose, that it's necessary. That's what I'm saying. It's compost. And unlocking it is kind of like in your phone, you swipe so that you can open up your phone. Like you have to break the code, and opening the code is to understand the value of the things that happen to you that that caused this suffering. So the example I was going to give, I went to Boston. Every time I take a trip, like I was told I was a very curious, adventurous, living in the moment little Sagittarius manifester in human design. And I got in so much trouble for that. And my mother, she was hypercritical. And like the last thing I was ever supposed to do was, you know, say what was on my mind. So all through my life, when I was young, I was really super shy, and I come from a family of Jewish intellectuals, so I was always trying to like appear like I knew something, and it seems like every single time I take a trip and I go somewhere, something happens to me where I have to go out in front of people and live in the moment and not be that I'm always back to being weak, like a 8-year-old with my mother. And so the first trip I took to Canada, the day before I left, I chopped off the top of my fingertip with a razor blade the day before I left. And I had to go to the hospital. It's actually it looks pretty healed. I still can't play guitar. But so then I'm traveling with my finger not working, and then I've got to lead stuff, and it's like there's all kinds of problems I'm having. So this trip, when I went to Boston, I just there was pressure in my environment that I was I could affecting me, and I got sick, and I had big groups of people, and there were some people who left but have come back after 7 years. One guy drove all the way from Los Angeles to Boston just to work with me on the weekend. Another guy came. You've met some of these people because they were in our trauma immersions. And all I wanted to be was like, I'm at my best right now. I'm like so excited. I'm happy to be with people, but I'm sick and I'm feeling terrible and I sort of look terrible. And I sat down in front of this group of people. It was like 20 people. And I basically like realized that this is my trauma code, that I'm not supposed to be powerful in that way. I'm here to go to the vulnerability of living in the moment and living in my heart. So I told them, that I was sick, but I said, this is the last thing that I wanted. But if I don't accept this, that I'm
Mhm.
sick, then it's just a bad thing that happened and I want it to go away. To me, this is the power of this work, is that if we can come in contact with these really difficult things, which is what the breath work does, and you
Mhm.
accept it in the breath work, then you're free because you're not afraid to feel anything. So the part of you that's like, there's certain conditioning. Don't want to tell people to come to the breath, or I don't know this person, or what's the plan? And what if nobody comes? All these things. If you live in that, well, it's just the adverse effects of it. But if it's actually there because that vulnerability is where you actually access something greater, then the problem is the solution. So
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I can relate. It's almost though, do you think that there's some sabotaging that goes on in those cases? Like you cut off your finger right before you get sick during is that part of it or not?
I've had 4 trips. I mean, first of all, I've traveled a lot, so 4 trips is not much, but where I've done something to my digits, either
Right.
before I left for the airport or on the way. One time I dropped a frying pan lid that was very sharp on my toe. I was going to Los Angeles, and I broke my toe basically, and by only 1 hour flight. But by the time I got to Los Angeles, my
It's
big
huge.
toe was like so big. And yeah, I mean, and I had to go from the airport to a reading night. So I have a reading night with a broken toe. Uh,
Uh,
I used to think of it as self-sabotage, but I actually feel like think the thing that maybe this is more deep than we need to get into, but there were things going on in the space when I got there that I felt vulnerable about. But I didn't go to the vulnerability. Like my wound is to be vulnerable and to be truthful is to get into trouble. So
mhm,
that's what I was saying in my story. So because I responded by trying to like play a role at the time, I got a sore throat and then I wasn't really feeling well. And I think that there is a part of the wisdom of the soul that it's not sabotage, is that I'm constantly putting myself in places to remind myself to be a, a humble person, a simple person, a failing person, a person with mistakes. Because when I do that, and I think you've even experienced that with me in conversation, like you're one of the first people. I mean, like giving for all these years, people only go through Sarah. You can't get in touch with me. Don't get my email. Don't get my phone number. Just book this, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm giving out my number. I'm giving out my email. I'm taking phone calls. I'm not charging for them. And I started that with you. We were on the phone one time for 2 or 3 hours because being this part of myself is actually how I'm effective in the work that I'm meant to do. And at this age, 60, I am celebrating the fact that I'm just not good at the world the way other people will make sure they don't chop their fingers off when they do things. I'm just the kind of person who doesn't master the world in that way. It's not my role. My role is the inner world, which I can navigate way more easily. That maybe, Jeff Bezos or something like can't do breath work, but he
mhm.
can run Amazon. But I'm not going to run Amazon. So all this is to say, you said about self-sabotage. I think that I don't see anything as negative
Yeah.
if you can learn, and if you're willing to, yeah, if you're willing to feel and to learn.
Mhm.
And, yeah.
So, can I ask you a question about that? Because I find this
Well,
really
let me check. No, yeah, okay, yes. One question, only
um,
one.
you talked about your vulnerability, like, when you were a kid, you tried to be seen and maybe you were dismissed, maybe all those things that happened in your conditioning, and now vulnerability when you go out and you're in front of people, do you think that vulnerability helps you? Because what I've noticed and what you say in the book is that, when we've done breathwork, sessions together, you're really good at seeing people, how they habitually move. So did that help you kind of hone in that skill, that vulnerability? Because you mentioned these are
Mm,
superpowers almost, right?
well, I think when you're young and you're in trouble for being who you are,
Mhm.
you learn just to pay attention to the cues of others. So some part of my development in my work came out of trauma for sure, in the sense that I I became sensitive to others. Now, is that being vulnerable? I think no. I think that was I was always vulnerable. Um, but I think that what I can do now is um, well, I could always be empathic and always read into other people. Like that's, and I can see that in the way people breathe. I can see that in when people are moving. I can see that in conversation. Like there's no part of me that's ever off. It's really for other people. It's not for me. So 24 hours a day, if I'm with people, I can always read them deeply and give information about that. I did it with the guy on the podcast. I didn't really want to because I wasn't sure. He asked me, and he said he didn't have any traumas, and I was like, are you sure you really want me to, you know
Mhm.
so then I kind of went into it, and what I expected happened, which was at first he was sort of resistant and arguing with me, and then I just I eventually wound my way into him, and after about 10 minutes, he was like, "Oh, that." And so I have that. It was wonderful. I love the Kyle. If you find the podcast, it's worth listening to because it was. He's this very sweet man, but I could always practice empathy, but being vulnerable when you're a leader or a guide is very hard to do because people have expectations and projections of what they think that you should be. And I'm not very alpha. I mean, I've raised kids, I'm a father, but I don't see myself as much of a father figure. Even at this age, I still feel like I'm a little bit of a just a I'm childish in a certain way, childlike. So I think that what vulnerability does is it gives permission for people to be who they really are
Mhm.
because I'm doing it. And I'm
Yeah,
not lording over my knowledge and my experience and my wisdom. And I've said this in every group I'm in. I probably will say it again when we're together in Boise because this is what was in my heart is that I've studied something for 35 years, or I've worked with people. I've been working on myself. So I have a technique and I have my wisdom and my skill. But there's nothing more powerful than human beings in a room together. The human
yeah,
energy of humans, like Boise wouldn't be happening if you and I hadn't connected. Like
right.
that's what this is really about. It's more powerful. And maybe I'm the guide in this situation, but that's my power to be the guide in this situation. Your power is to show up for it and keep going, even though there were many reasons for us to stop and let it go. And I just as much thought it might happen as it wouldn't happen. So we're playing our roles, but that's about our connection, and that's vulnerability. That's
Mhm.
it. That's intimacy. So when we sit in a room with people, like there's going to be nothing more powerful, not the breath work or not my insight, than the shared uh, intent of the group and the feeling of what can happen while we're in the room together with that intention.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's beautiful. Um, why why is it like that, do you think? The more breathing at a time, the more energy that comes up.
say that again.
So, like, with a bigger group,
Why is it more powerful with a bigger group?
so yeah.
I don't. I mean, I think it can be equally powerful individually in a group. But the thing about group energy is with the breath. You're talking about breath work, or you're just talking about being together in a group?
Breathwork
Yeah.
and
Okay.
yeah,
Because I don't know, like if you go to a Trump rally, I'm sure like this, just get a lot of people together
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Any rally, by the way, I'm not taking sides. Um, I'm from Canada, by the way. So you cannot avoid being affected. And there are people who won't come because of it. Like we did a mega breath, we called it that in Boston. There were 100 people, and there was this woman just way off in the corner by herself. And like afterwards, she said that that was worse than sex abuse. I mean, and she basically said that she didn't want to be around all the people because she couldn't focus and she was affected by what was going on around her. And I'm like, well, you're in the wrong place. Like,
Yeah,
so when people lay down to breathe together, there's a logarithmic effect because you're affected by both the things people go on that are in you. Because it's somebody screaming. If you don't have what they're feeling inside you, you're not going to resonate. It's not going to matter.
right.
But so there's the resonance of that, but there's also a power the group takes when they breathe together that starts to be like everybody is breathing, the whole thing is breathing itself. And it the unfolding of it is just it's just a lot of light because breath is God, breath is the universe, and it's like everyone's breathing in light, and like it's just so logarithmically powerful putting lots of people in a room. A lot of
Mhm.
combustion.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I bet. I've done group breathworks, like, the end of our training, we did group breathworks, and they were very powerful, for sure.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was hard to even get into it because other people were, you know, in their process, and that
Some
can be
people do better and some people do, like, if you're a Virgo, like, maybe you just start paying attention to every fucking detail in the room and you can't concentrate. How's my how's my reading of you? But
Yep,
sometimes if you're like a Pisces, you're like, "Wow, I'm
yeah,
just,"
just in
or
it.
you're a Pisces, it's like, "I can't find myself inside this." So, you know,
Yeah,
I would just say to anybody who's listening to this conversation, uh, you know, I am instructing all the way through. So I'm not going to leave anybody to their own devices. If I saw you in the room, I would immediately know that's what you were going through and I would help you so that you could focus. Yeah.
mhm,
Even
yeah,
just the way I might touch or speak. I mean, I have my way to try to be grounding if somebody needs that. Yeah.
mhm, yeah.